All right. Welcome to Raising Deaf Kids. And we have such a special guest. I've been so excited to have you on. Her name is Erin, and she, with her husband, have a clothing line called Sincerely by God. And Erin is also on Erin Follows Jesus. And we are going to talk all about getting that language access through your church, welcoming the deaf community into your church. This is such an important conversation and one that, like, honestly, I have been waiting to have and wanting to have on this podcast. So thank you so much, Erin, for coming on and talking with us about this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me here. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you have in store. I just love your platform and the ideas and the awareness that you're spreading of the deaf community. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think my other people know, but in case you're new for the first time, and so you know, Erin, I have um, two out of three of my kids were born deaf, and they both got cochlear implants at 11 months of age. And my oldest, who is 8, he speaks, and my 5-year-old, well, actually, he's 6 now. Sorry, he just had a birthday. He signs. And then I have a hearing little girl who is 3.
Nice, nice.
And so we have all
So,
types. Mhm.
so, are you learning American Sign Language because of your children?
Yes. Yes, specifically my 6-year-old who does not talk. So he does not have full hearing with his cochlear implants. And he has a teacher of the deaf at school, and he uses sign language at school. She's with him all day long and interprets for him and helps him and teaches him. She's fantastic. And so we are trying to learn more and more at home as well to like keep communicating with him and keep building his language too. He's my busy one. So
Yeah, yeah.
he's my busiest one, of course. And he's my one who doesn't want to pay attention. Like he's the one that should be paying attention and doesn't want to. So
Oh, it's like the middle child thing,
yes.
I'm not a middle child. I don't know if it's true. Is that really a thing?
Yes. In my
Okay.
in my experience it is. And I am the oldest child in my family, and I am definitely the typical oldest child. And both of my sisters would tell you that. But now that you know about me and everybody else knows about me, I would love to hear about you and a little bit about your story, and kind of how you came to start talking about what you talk about, on Instagram.
Well, let's start back. I grew up in a Christian home, but as you know, with the deaf community, there's gaps of access with lack of interpreters or churches not providing access. So I didn't really know sign language until 9 years old. And I also have a deaf brother who knew sign language at 13. So we both were obligated to speak at home. It was easier for my parents to communicate that way, and they really didn't know any better. But as I grew up, I knew about Jesus, but did I really understand enough to the extent to follow him and to really follow the Bible? I really didn't. I didn't read the Bible and I didn't know. And so it wasn't until after college where I felt like my life was kind of maybe not boring, but there was just something missing in my life. So I realized that there was something missing, and I leaned towards minimalism, being a minimalist and purging things. But then I realized that that wasn't it. It was mentally and emotionally needing to purge. And that led me to Jesus, which is kind of ironic. So I went that route, became saved, was baptized in 2017. No, 2018, somewhere around that time. And I finally decided to read the Bible. I had been relying on other sources, other people to tell me what the Bible says, but I wanted to read it for myself. And it was amazing. I realized that deaf people not only have a lack of access, but also their English is not their primary language. So perhaps they don't understand the Bible in English. And I wanted to translate it in ASL so that they understood what some of these terms meant in the Bible. And that all started in 2020 with longer form videos. And I've shortened them now to shorter videos.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, and I think you already brought up some really great points, about kind of how the church functions with the deaf community. And also, I would put the disability community in there as well, as in they're really not functioning with them. And I think that is really important to note. And it sounds like that when you were growing up, you, and correct me if I'm wrong, didn't really have any like language access in your church or your church programs that you could really like connect with. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. I went to a Bible study group before church services started, and I just had no clue what was going on. And I was trying to read lips, and I'm pretty proficient at reading lips, but it wasn't sufficient to understand the message completely. And so I did have an interpreter for a short period of time. I don't even remember how long that interpreter was there, but it wasn't a great proficient interpreter either. So that was an issue. And so it wasn't really an engaging experience for me.
Yeah. Now I'd love to know how that made you feel being part of a church, but not really being a part of it, right?
I've always felt disconnected from the hearing community in general, mainly because they don't roll up their sleeves and take the time, whether it's gesturing or even bothering to just make sure I even understood, or even my own parents not making sure if I was really just understanding it. And it all just kind of got lumped in. But as I look back, the lack of education um, is there, and I don't blame anyone. I think we need to talk more about this to help the hearing community understand what we need. So
Yeah, I agree. When I posted, you gave me this t-shirt that I'm wearing. Yay, thank you. I love it. And I posted
you're
that reel on
welcome.
Instagram that I posted. I had a parent who I know well is part of my community, comment on it where I was talking about my two deaf kids and how the big statistic and like eye opener for me was that my two children who are deaf have less of a chance to hear the gospel than my hearing child, simply because they have hearing loss. And that really put a burden on my heart to talk about this and to, try to guess be more like a bridge between the hearing mainstream church and the deaf community, and kind of like encouraging the church to welcome the deaf community more and like how they could do that. And I had a parent who's a hearing parent. She has a child with cochlear implants, and she said that church is the least accessible part of their week. So school is more accessible to her kids than church is. And I find that to be true of mine too. And I find as the parent, especially of my child who does sign, I am the one signing to him. And I am the one trying to learn some of the words to the songs and sign to him. But then, I find when he goes back to like children's church during the service, I am not sure how much he is getting because no one is signing to him. They're using pictures, but I highly doubt that he is understanding as much as even my 8-year-old who has cochlear implants can fully hear and can talk. Right. And, so that was impactful for me to really think about how can I get the gospel to my deaf kids who are otherwise not going to get the access to it and get to know about it simply because they have hearing loss. And so I would love to talk about what are the barriers. I think we touched on this a little bit. What are the barriers to the deaf community knowing the gospel, knowing Jesus?
Well, nowadays people can listen to the Bible in audio form while they're driving, and obviously us in the deaf community can't. That's a barrier, obviously. I wish I could be driving along and just turn on the Bible readings anytime, but we don't have that access. And also, more and more people now are doing man on the street interviews. And if a deaf person were to walk by, they would miss that opportunity to engage with a person who has questions about Jesus. And so it's not just the gospel that we're lacking in, it's communication of every aspect. More people know ASL, whether it's just simple signs like thank you, Jesus loves you, come to our church, and to think, oh, we might need to provide an interpreter and search for someone and take that on rather than thinking they have to know ASL completely to explain it. I mean, it's just nice to have that connection of bridging the gap and just bringing in the right people into their lives.
Yeah, and I love because I think one misconception that I feel I see a lot in the church and just from people in general is one kind of not really realizing that my kids like actually can't hear as well. Almost like a denial of the hearing loss, but I don't believe that they're doing it on purpose. For some reason, I know I have
Right.
heard of a lot of deaf adults talk about this, and I didn't really realize it. I think because my kids were so young and we didn't see it as much, and now that they're getting a little bit older and a little bit more independent to do activities on their own, I really am seeing that there is like I'm not believing that they can't fully hear, especially because they have the cochlears, and I'm not understanding that my 6-year-old, even though he's wearing cochlears, still have like a hearing deficit, and does need that sign. And I also have trouble. I am like signing to my son as much as I know, and I'm continuing to learn signs, and I'm very active in signing in front of people. And then I find that people who I know at least a few signs are like don't sign to him. I think they are maybe like shy about it or not sure about it. But I'm like, no, I have trouble convincing people that this is really how he communicates. Like he does not talk. And I don't know why that is. And maybe it's just because I live with him every day and I live with my kids every day. And this is just like how our house is, and it's not how everybody's house is. So I see a lot of times a real denial of that, like someone really can't hear. And I from the church that they're saying, okay, like we caption things, which is good. I'm not saying that's not. And also, we provide like handouts, and we, can read the Bible, and we provide like written handouts of what like the sermon is, which like I said, all is good. But I would really like to talk to you about why ASL specifically, or sign language, is really important to the deaf community, because that's not something that I realized growing up not with hearing loss, and no one else has hearing loss in our family. So our two boys are the first. So we are always like learning and trying to figure it out too. I would have thought, okay, like captioning is fine as well. And then along the way, I learned, like you were saying earlier, that is almost like a second language. English and a sign language are different. And it would be like, for example, I'm fluent in Spanish, but it's my second language. So like listening to something in Spanish, I understand it, but I definitely don't understand it and the nuances as well as if I were hearing it in English, which is my first language.
Yeah, I understand. Um, I guess to help them understand why ASL is important, we are visual learners. We use our eyes to see everything. I mean, we just don't have that auditory sense. So our visual senses are more heightened. And so you can imagine if you're covering your ears and you just don't hear anything, you become more dependent on what you're seeing to be aware of your environment. So that enhances our visual acuity. And so we're just very visual. So American Sign Language is so visual. So that's perfect for us. And so sometimes you'll know an English word or a phrase, and there's some kind of huge word in there that deaf people just don't know because it's just not signed in American Sign Language, but it's in English. So we might have a one-for-one sign for an English word, and that's fine. But if you say exciting, for example, there's other words for exciting, but you would use the same sign. But it doesn't have that same dimension. So I don't know if that makes sense. Right? Is that making sense?
Yeah, that definitely does. And I think that's definitely important for churches to hear that the captioning, the written is great, but really to understand, I guess, the heart of the sermon, the heart of the gospel,
The
ASL.
heart language. Yeah, the heart of the
Mhm.
language.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had, something else that really like convicted me was we had um a missionary family come who they are all regular hearing. They learn sign language and they are missionaries to the deaf community in the Dominican Republic. So they came to talk to, our church about learning sign language, what they were doing. Our church like supports them. And, I was talking to them afterwards and the mom, the wife, said to me, "Oh, yeah, like ASL is your son's heart language." And I had never thought about that before because we're hearing,
Yeah.
and that is our language. And, I had never thought about that my son would have a different language that means more to him than the language I speak.
Well, I wouldn't say that it means more to him. I think it would just be that it's unique because all languages are spoken, if you realize that. And so with the deaf community, they use their hands. So that's what makes us very unique.
Yeah. No, I mean, I love it. I think it's beautiful. And I would love to talk about, how can churches start to welcome the deaf community? I know you talk a lot about like connection and, bringing community and making connections with all people. So how do we start doing that? Now I'm asking for my church too, because I actually am trying to do this in my church. My church is open, but we're a very small church, and my kids are the only deaf people in my church currently, or the only people with hearing loss. So I personally, for myself, also would like to know how we can start, what we need to put in place, and what are some first steps that we can take to start welcoming the deaf community into our community.
Yeah, I understand. I've asked a couple churches around here, and there's one church that actually declined providing interpreters, even though they have a funding and they're a pretty large church. They still denied it, and it shocked me, of course. And I don't understand the rationale behind it. I guess I'll never understand. But to help bring in deaf community members, I'm actually not sure how you would start, but I would think that you would probably want to go and talk with sign language interpreter agencies, make some calls to the local deaf schools, anyone in your area that has a connection with interpreters. Like myself, this interpreter that's here with me, she could interpret at a church. She probably interprets for her family members or so forth that are deaf. But many interpreters are not even willing to interpret at church because they have their own personal beliefs that are opposite. So that's kind of a barrier. So we have to try to find more Christian interpreters too. So we need to actually grow that base. And there is one interpreter agency called Sunshine Interpreting Agency, and they focus on Christian based interpreters and they place interpreters in churches. So I could give you them as a resource that they could probably help you out as well.
That would be great. And what else can we do? Say, like, we don't know sign language very well. People in the church don't know sign language, but they still want to welcome people with hearing loss into the church, because really, I think the heart of this is like communities are very separate. The hearing loss community, the deaf community is very separate from the hearing community. But we're all one community. We're all going to heaven together, right? We're all the same community in God's eyes. So how do we mesh the two together?
We need to find more people that will open their hearts to want to help the deaf community. There's a lot of people who go to church and say hi and then leave. But we need to encourage them to actually sit and talk with us more, engage, and learn more about us. We already know that they can hear and that there's going to be a barrier, but I am always thrilled every time a hearing person approaches me and talks to me, whether they're writing through their phone or doing a little bit of the finger spelling they know or anything. I mean, we are thrilled. That is enough for us to feel part of a community. So I think we need more of that.
Yeah, that's great. And I would love to know you, I know you're a parent too. And I talk a lot about to parents as well about being leaders in their community, whether that is their schools, being involved in their kids' schools, and have educating people on the hearing loss, being examples of what it's like to live with a family of hearing loss, and really normalizes hearing loss for the rest of the community, which, I think you don't know what you don't know, right? And if you've never been around someone who is deaf or been around someone with hearing loss, you don't know how to act or what to say, or you think you're going to say the wrong thing. And I am very open. And so I just open myself up from my perspective and what I can tell, about what it's like having, my two kids with hearing loss and being a parent and stuff. But I would love to give parents some tips about how they can maybe start being leaders in their churches. And, if they have kids with hearing loss, how can we start to kind of show our church, educate our church about hearing loss, normalize it, and start showing our churches how to give more access to the language to the deaf community. Because really, moms, everything starts with moms, I feel like. Moms do everything, and we do everything for our
Yes,
kids,
yes.
and we educate everybody.
Yes, yes. Everything starts at home. That's what I was just trying to say, is that we are responsible for our children in every aspect of their lives. So yes, you and I as mothers, we are the role models for our children and for our community. So if you continue to have conversations with the pastor or the church members who are running the church, make sure that you just keep educating them and encouraging them, and maybe offer an ASL class for the church members specifically. And then you could hire a deaf person to come and teach. They could just sign up, and maybe they'd be willing to talk with your kids more often if they start somewhere, as far as getting exposed to the language. But you are already making a difference in your children's lives, because you are already signing with them and you're already close with Jesus. And so you're doing a fantastic job already.
I love that. Thank you. And thanks for encouraging the parents. I really do think, and this is what I tell parents, that it just takes building relationships and just talking to people, a lot of times, and opening yourself up to questions, not being overly concerned at the beginning of like language and titles, just opening yourself up as a safe place for people to come and feel like they can ask questions. They can ask questions that they feel embarrassed or silly to be asking. They feel like they should know, because that's what I have done. That's what I've done at my kids' school. I have just like gone to the birthday parties and just made connections with the parents. And then once I get to know them, the parents start naturally asking me about hearing loss with my kids, and I answer the questions openly and honestly and, with grace, and I never like turn a question away. And I think that's what it really takes. It's really a one at a time thing.
Yes, yes, that's definitely a good start because that's what I would do. I get a lot of questions too, not only from moms, but I just love when people say, like, I'm sorry, I was just clueless about hearing loss. And I said, no, no, you're never clueless. I'd rather you ask me than not even ask at all because there's no questions that are dumb questions. It's okay. So just bring on the questions. And so I love it. I love creating dialogue and having people have these aha moments to where they realize they need to change something or they get motivated to learn ASL. But again, Jesus is based on developing relationships with people. And so we just need to copy him. And relationships are very important so that people can feel more confident with opening up to you.
Yeah, I love that. And I would love to see what are some ways that you talk with your kids at home about Jesus and about God, because it's right. And whether or not like the church is accessible, it should be, we're working on it. Like you said, it all starts in the home, and talking about Jesus doesn't stop at church. It is a continual, conversation with
Right.
kids. So I would love to know what are some ways that you guys do that at home with your kids that maybe other parents can do too, because I can always give them access to the Bible at home.
Yes, yes, that's a good question. I always try to include God in every conversation I have with my children. So, for example, my children will get in a fight with their friends, or I'll catch some angry faces or yelling, and I'll tell them to take a break and kind of explain what they should do with the concept of the scriptures to back it up and what would Jesus want them to do. And then they can approach that friend and solve that problem. So I try to apply scripture to real life examples that they encounter. And so a lot of scriptures, like if you read the Bible every day, all that information just becomes from the back of your mind to the top of your mind, and you can just easily extemporaneously talk about it. And so I always emphasize one verse, Romans chapter 12 verse 21, which is, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome the evil with good. Because my kids sometimes just want to get revenge, or they want to hurt someone else, or they want to hit back. Kids will be kids. But I always come back with, like, no, don't do that. That's God's responsibility. You just do a little bit more. Don't go below level, but just do a little bit more. And so I just try to tell them and these concepts. So you just have to keep explaining to them about what's right, what's wrong, and what the Bible says. And it's not necessarily my opinion, it's the Bible's. So
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I like, it's not me. It's the
right,
Bible.
right.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
I know. Yeah, yeah, kids. No, that sounds like my kids because that's children.
Yes, right. Yeah. And it's just a natural flesh response. Even adults do it too. We want to get back at someone, we want to drag people down. It's just a natural response. And that's why Jesus said that we need to kind of just to stretch ourselves every day, because the flesh sometimes will overtake us and we have to work on keeping that at bay.
Yeah, I love that. That is a great thing. Like you said, for anyone to think about that affects all of us, kids up to adults. I would love to know, did you guys watch the Jesus film?
Not yet. I was on vacation with the family and I didn't have time, and I didn't want to give any reviews yet because I haven't watched it. So I'm going to refrain from that.
No, that's fine. I would just love to talk about how impactful this could be to the deaf community, because I'm not on Instagram a lot. I stay off of social media pretty much. It's not on my phone. But the little tiny bit that I am on it, like when this film came out, I saw people talking about Jesus that I have never heard talk about before, like in sign language, like people that I didn't even know. I thought were probably Christian, were probably believers, but I didn't know. They never talked about it. It's not part of their platform, which is fine. But I mean, like I feel like this is a big God move, honestly, for the deaf community. And I would love to just hear your thoughts, since you are part of that community, about how this could impact. And like, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the first film like in a movie theater completely in ASL. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, yes. And it's even great that it's a Christian film and it's not like a worldly film. So that's exciting too. Yeah, yeah. It'll have a huge impact to the non-Christian deaf community too, because a lot of actors are not Christians, if you didn't know, and some of them are saved because of the movie. So that's a tremendous win. And I hope that more hearing people will go just to see our language, even if they don't understand, because some people go just because of that. And I think that's great because it does have open captions in the movie theater. And I'm seeing a lot of impacts in small ways. So I can't wait to see more. I need to see it for myself. So
Yeah, we haven't been either because we've been busy. Actually, this week we have camp for all of my kids. My two boys are doing ASL camp at their school. It's the first year that their school is doing this.
oh nice.
We've had a big response. In fact, parents are asking for 2 weeks next year.
Oh, that's incredible.
It's so fun. And at nighttime, we've been doing vacation Bible school at our church. So our day has been filled. So we haven't seen it yet, but I'm excited to take my kids to see it. They're probably not going to make it all the way through, but I feel like any exposure is good.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I've heard that the movie has a lot of blood. So that is a
Okay.
warning
Okay,
for
maybe not.
kids if that means something to you.
Maybe just me. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, maybe like
Didn't
pre-screen
think
it
about that
and
ending. Yeah,
then decide. Yeah, the crucifixion part. Yeah. And
makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, I would love to talk about your clothing line a little bit because I love it. Like I said, I'm wearing the shirt. Thank you so much. It's very comfortable. And I really love the message. I would love to talk about, I know you and your husband put this together. I would just love to talk about your heart behind starting the clothing line and what you hope to, accomplish with, the clothes and with your platform.
Yeah, yeah. So it all goes back to when I told you that I started reading the Bible. Well, actually, it goes back a little further than that. I had a bracelet that said, "God, God's got this," and I met an elderly man at a photo shoot area out in the park, and he was hearing and I was deaf, couldn't communicate, and he pointed to my bracelet and he pointed to him and to me, like saying that we were the same. And then we started talking back and forth on text just because of this bracelet. And I said, wow, that kind of sparked an idea in my mind that I wanted to do that. I wanted to do something more, maybe with a business or something. But then when I got home and I was reading the Bible, God nudged me and said, not now. Read the whole Bible before you start doing a business. And I'm like, come on, really? Okay. So I obeyed. And finally, I established my business, but I really started with simple messages like saved by grace. It was a full text. There weren't a lot of sales at that time. And so I tried to think of another way. And my husband and I we use ASL. So we thought, why not, instead of using text, make a shirt in ASL and then kind of combine both worlds, the hearing and the deaf community. So we started thinking about how we could do that. So we used my hands as the model, and he used drawing tools to be able to add the words, and the rest is history.
I think that is so cool that he used your hands for the models because it's true. There's no graphics for ASL. There's like the I love you hand sign and then individual letters. So
Yeah.
you have to like spell out the word with the letters, but there's not a
Yeah. And I
lot
don't
of
like that.
yeah. I don't
Yeah.
it gets clunky. Yeah. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
So,
what is your guys' hope for this clothing line and for your platform and what you guys are doing? What would you guys ultimately like to see come of that?
well, I want to use this clothing line to spark conversations at the grocery store, on the street, and if you're a hearing person wearing it and someone sees your shirt and they can be like, hey, do you know ASL, a deaf person or a hearing person too, they could just approach you and be like, oh, and they might even copy your sign, Jesus loves you, and they think, oh, that's cool. And then they leave and they actually meet a deaf person. They'd be like, hey, Jesus loves you in ASL. They could say it. And it's just a simple phrase. And that could impact that deaf person. And they could eventually become saved. I mean, who knows? I mean, I'm dreaming big here. Um, so that's something that I want God to use as a springboard. And I'm telling God constantly to use me to spread the gospel. Just use me. And so he's using me in so many different ways. And I'm hoping that this apparel will help the hearing and the deaf communities to be engaged more with one another, spark invitations to churches, develop relationships. I mean, just the whole picture. And I hope that people will wear it and use it as a conversation starter.
Yeah, I love that. I wear this one and I also have a few others that, have like the I love you hand sign that have some ASL and stuff. And I'm just like, I wear them all the time. I'm begging for someone to come talk to me. I'm like, please come talk to me. No one has yet. A lot of people come talk to me because they see my kids. Maybe because I'm like
Yeah.
hurrying around with children all the time at this point in my life. But well, they come talk to me a
Yeah.
lot because they see my kids with the cochlears and they wear headbands to keep the cochlears on. So that like right now opens up a lot of conversations because they'll come ask me about the cochlears or they heard about them and that kind of like opens it up. But I still wear my shirts because I'm like, please come talk to me. Maybe one day.
Yeah, yeah. And even a person told me that they went to the doctor's office and the doctor started copying the signs on their shirt. And that's cool. That's like a cool little story that there's already impact being made. And so we're going to see more of that.
I love that. And what would you, how would you like to see God move within the deaf community? Because I really do not think it's a coincidence that the first like major like film in a movie theater in ASL was a film about Jesus. I really feel like God is bringing the hearing and the deaf community together and also telling the deaf community, hey, like you are included in this. Like, you know, I love you too. Like you are a part of this as well as everybody else, where I feel like up until now, the deaf community, and like I said, I could probably put in other communities of people with like disabilities have not maybe gotten that message from the church. I feel like the church, the mainstream church also really looks at like disabilities and hearing loss still as like a bad thing, as like something went wrong or something happened and their reaction to like parents who have a child with a disability or have a child with hearing loss is more of a I'm sorry versus I don't know, like a neutral or I always just am honest and open and just say I'm fine with my kids hearing loss. I would not like ask God to change them because he like they had hearing loss from birth. He literally made them this way, and this is how he wanted them. And that's fine. Like everyone is perfectly and wonderfully made, including my children who were born deaf, just as much as my child who was born hearing. And I don't feel like parents get that message from the church yet.
So it's not the church's problem only. Like it seems like doctors, the medical community, there's this medical culture of wanting to fix deaf people. And so I think that's another issue in the culture too. Because when my children were born, they're like, oh, great news. Your children passed their hearing screening, and I'm like, okay. And, I mean, that's a very common response. And some deaf parents receive that message and they actually see it as bad news that they passed, or they get the message from the doctor like, oh, bad news, your child failed the hearing screening. And it's like, let's change the perspectives. God made us the way we are, and we can accept that. And I can think of another example where if a child lost their arm and they don't have an arm when they're born, what do you do? Oh, you say, I'm so sorry, they don't have an arm. No, you live with it, you learn more about it, you educate yourself. And I think that's the same thing with everything, with any disability. You just learn more about it from the community, not from people who haven't experienced it themselves. So you want to go to the deaf community and ask them about whether or not you should learn ASL or what are the proper things to do. And if there's another community that is like the autism community, ask them, like, how am I supposed to act? You actually go to the source. And I think that's the problem, is it's not happening that way.
Yeah, that is actually really great advice to, yeah, go to the source and say, like, what would help you? How can we like be supportive of you and welcoming of you? And what do you need to be more comfortable in services and, coming to church and being a part of the community?
Yes, yes. And I think the important thing is to just keep talking about it, keep going to the church, keep telling them what your child needs. And that's all you can really do. And of course, pray about it.
Thank you. Well, we are getting towards the end of our time, and I want to respect your time. And I thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. I always ask people if they can leave our parents, because our parents are hearing the majority, and they do have kids with hearing loss. So this is a very, I mean, for most parents, a very new world to be in. And most parents, like myself, didn't expect to have kids with hearing loss. And so it's just, something different than what they expected. And so I love to ask my guests, what is one or two things, pieces of encouragement, tips, whatever that you can leave to parents to, maybe better help with their kids with hearing loss or encourage them?
I would encourage all parents to love your children, regardless if your child has a hearing loss or not, because they are the same. Treat them the same. Just be willing to learn American Sign Language because they need it so much. As much as hearing their parents speak, I would say learn ASL for your child, whether or not they have a hearing aid, a cochlear implant, or not. Always incorporate ASL. And thank you for those questions. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I love meeting you.
Yes, I love meeting you too.